Your willpower isn't weak. It's been hijacked. And the hijacker is a molecule your ancestors used to survive. Here's what nobody talks about. You've felt it. That 3-minute window where you promise to focus. Then your hand moves. The phone lights up. 20 minutes vanish into a scroll hole you didn't choose to dig. That's not laziness. That's your dopamine system being rewritten by a world your brain never evolved to inhabit. In 1957, a Swedish pharmacologist named Arvid Carlsson isolated something his colleagues thought was just a chemical stepping stone, a precursor to something else. He proved it was its own neurotransmitter, dopamine, the molecule of prediction, the molecule that says this might matter. Pay attention. He won the Nobel Prize for it in the year 2000. But here's the part nobody talks about. Carlson's discovery revealed a system that evolved over 600 million years to keep you alive on a savanna where reward was scarce. A berry bush meant food. A rustle in the grass meant danger. Dopamine fired when your brain detected a pattern that might lead to survival. Now that same system is being triggered every 6 seconds by a rectangle in your pocket. A 2024 Pew Research Center survey found the average American adult spends 7 hours per day on screens. 7 hours. That's more time than we spend sleeping, more than we spend with our families, more than we spend doing anything except breathing, and your brain is paying the price. This is the dopamine trap, not a metaphor, a measurable biological downgrade from your ancestral wiring. And the neuroproof is sitting in 40 years of longitudinal brain scans, reaction time tests, and PET imaging that shows exactly how your attention span is being pulled apart molecule by molecule. Here's what the data shows. In 2021, a team at Vanderbilt University scanned 28 adults while they heard random smartphone notification tones. Each ping produced a measurable spike in dopamine binding in the ventral striatum, the brain's reward hub, equivalent to a half-standard deviation increase. That's the same magnitude of release you'd see from a small dose of amphetamine. Except it wasn't a drug. It was a sound. A ding that your brain had learned to treat as a survival signal. And the participants' reaction times on a go or no-go task became 15% more variable immediately after each tone. Their attention fragmented, not because they were distracted, because their reward circuit was screaming that something important had just appeared, even when it hadn't. Now think about this. Your ancestors had no such sound, no glowing rectangle, no algorithm designed by thousands of engineers to maximize the time your eyes spend on a screen. I, Kung hunter in the Kalahari, might check a bush 20 times in an hour while tracking a wounded antelope. Each check has a purpose. Each glance is aligned with a real survival goal. The dopamine is released when the animal is found, when the food is secured, when the pattern completes. Your pattern never completes. You scroll, you see a headline, you half read it, you scroll again. That dopamine release from the anticipation of reward, the moment before you find something interesting, happens 70 times per hour, but the reward itself is empty. Your brain learns that the signal is noise, that nothing behind the ping is worth your attention, but it keeps pinging anyway. And your ancestral wiring, built for an environment where every signal meant food or danger, cannot stop responding. This is where it gets strange. In 2022, JAMA Psychiatry published a study that measured dopamine receptor availability in the striatum of 60 adolescents. Those who used smartphones more than 5 hours per day showed 8% lower D2, 9D3 receptor binding potential compared to low-use peers. 8%. That's the same direction of change seen in early stages of substance use disorders. The brain, overwhelmed by constant dopamine hits, downregulates its own receptors. It grows less sensitive, which means you need more stimulus to feel the same level of interest. which means you reach for the phone more, which means the receptors drop further. Downward spiral. No bottom in sight. But here's the thing. Your grandfather didn't live with this. Neither did your great-grandfather. The human brain spent 99.9% of its existence in environments where dopamine was withheld, where reward came after effort, after patience, after sustained attention over hours or days. Not seconds. The continuous performance test, first standardized in the 1950s, measured how long a person could sustain attention on a simple target detection task. Back then, the average young adult could go 20 minutes without a lapse. A meta-analysis published in Psychological Bulletin in 2021 by Jean Twenge and Keith Campbell pooled 34 independent studies with over 112,000 participants. Their finding: adolescents with more than 3 hours of daily screen time scored 27% poorer on standardized attention measures than those with less exposure. The effect size was medium. The direction was clear. We are not the same baseline we were. That is the statistical signature of a mass neurological shift happening across one generation. Now stop and picture this. fMRI slide published in Neuro in 2021 shows the brain of a subject trying to focus on a reading comprehension task while their phone sits face up on the table. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive control, for saying no to impulse, for holding a goal in mind, is dim, underlit. The amygdala and the ventral striatum, the threat and reward centers, are glowing hot. Your brain is not designed to override a survival signal with willpower. It's designed to treat every dopamine cue as urgent. So when you can't focus, it's not because you're weak. It's because your hardware is running software written for a different planet. Here's the part that makes this personal. A separate line of research from the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which has tracked hippocampal volume in thousands of adults since 1958, found that chronic stress, specifically the kind produced by constant digital interruption, correlates with faster shrinkage of the hippocampus. That's the memory center. The part of your brain that encodes new information, that builds the recall you rely on when you forget why you walked into a room. Every ping, every interruption, every half-read article leaves a cortisol trace in your bloodstream. Cortisol is toxic to the hippocampus. Over years, the tissue compresses. You are not imagining that your memory is slower than it used to be. You are measuring in real time the effect of a habitat that degrades the very organ you need to navigate it. And that's when the real collapse begins. The dopamine trap has a second layer. It's not just that your attention fractures. It's that your brain's reward circuit becomes so accustomed to microbursts of novelty that it cannot tolerate the absence of stimulus. The resting state becomes unbearable. You sit in a quiet room with no device. Within 30 seconds, something in your chest tightens. Your hand twitches. You feel a low-grade anxiety that didn't exist 3 years ago. That feeling is physical. An EEG measurement taken during resting state, before any task, with eyes open in a silent room, shows that heavy smartphone users produce a distinct pattern of alpha wave suppression. Alpha waves are the brain's idle signal. They're supposed to emerge when you're calm, awake, and not actively processing. When they're suppressed, it means your brain is in a state of constant readiness. Scanning, searching, treating silence as a gap to be filled. Your ancestors, by contrast, were fluent in boredom. The Hadza of Tanzania spent up to 5 hours per day sitting quietly. No activity, no entertainment. Their brains are not in distress. Their alpha waves are dominant. They're resting in a way your brain has forgotten how to do. Now think about this. The Yerkes-Dodson law, formalized in 1908 and later linked to dopaminergic tone by researchers like Robbins and Everett, describes an inverted U relationship between arousal and performance. Too little arousal and you're sluggish. Too much and you're scattered. The peak sits in the middle. But your brain is being held at the far right edge of that curve, chronically over-aroused by constant dopamine stimulation, while being asked to perform tasks that require the middle. Focus, sustained effort. The prefrontal cortex dims while the reward circuit screams. The design is the problem, not you. And here's where the data gets damning. In a 2020 double-blind placebo-controlled experiment published in Neuro, 45 healthy adults took methylphenidate, a drug that increases dopamine availability, and performed the psychomotor vigilance task. The result? Dopamine transporter binding increased by 12% and lapses of attention dropped by 31%. The conclusion was clinical. When dopamine levels are normalized, when the brain gets the signal strength it was built for, attention improves. The problem in the modern environment is not that dopamine is too low. It's that the pattern of release is wrong. Constant microspikes instead of deeper, sustained signals tied to completed goals. You are not broken. Your brain is behaving exactly as it should for an organism swimming in a sea of cheap dopamine. The tragedy is that the sea didn't exist before you were born. A 2014 fMRI study by Kelly and colleagues mapped the brain's salience network and showed that dopamine-rich regions, the ventral striatum, the anterior cingulate, fire preferentially to novel digital cues. Novelty, that was a survival signal on the savannah. A new sound could mean a predator. A new smell could mean water. Today, novelty means a red notification dot, and your brain treats it with the same urgency. You cannot willpower your way out of a biological circuit, but you can change the environment. This is the moment where most people feel the sting of recognition. If you're feeling it, that means your wiring is still plastic. The next step is understanding that the trap has a known exit path. The reward circuit can be retrained. The D2, D3 receptor density can recover. The hippocampus can stop shrinking, but only if you stop treating every ping as a survival cue. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody talks about. The studies are clear. The continuous performance tests from the 1950s show a baseline that your brain today cannot match. The fMRI slides show a prefrontal cortex that dims under notification stress. The PET scans show dopamine receptor downregulation. The EEG shows alpha suppression in silence. The evidence is consistent across decades, across laboratories, across nations. Your brain is measurably slower than your grandfather's. Not because you're less intelligent. Because your environment is designed to break your attention. And now that you see the circuit, you have the choice to rewire it. The loop isn't your fault. It's your ancestors' ghost in your hardware. The same system that kept them alive for 600 million years is now being exploited by algorithms that learned your weaknesses faster than you did. But the ghost can be quieted. Not with willpower, with environment design, with creating a habitat where dopamine arrives after effort, not before it, where silence is not an emergency, where your brain can return to the resting state it was built for. The first step is seeing the trap clearly. The second step is walking away from it. And that choice, right now, in this moment, is the only biological override you have. What happens next is on you.